The forest is never more quiet than when you're sitting motionlessly in a tree stand, waiting for that distinct flash of movement that tells you your prey is near. Yet, no matter how quiet it gets, you're too focused. You only hear and see what's in front of you. When the clawed abomination crawls up the other side of the tree and is only seconds away from breathing down your neck, you have no idea it's coming, and at this point, there's nothing you could do about it, even if you knew. Your fate is set. All so you could have some deer jerky. These are allegedly true scary hunting stories. If you want your story to possibly be narrated on this show, share it with us at darknessprevails.org. My first time hunting. From OK Chloe. Location unknown. I was 16 years old in 2012 when this happened. My family has been avid hunters for years, so when I got my hunting license, they immediately put in a request to hunt in one of the most popular areas in my state. I'll set the scene a bit. My grandfather and I were going to be staying in that area for 2.5 weeks inside an RV. Then a couple of my cousins would be driving to us, staying for their turn, then drive the RV back at the end of the season. My granddad, Kay, packed everything he could think of, even an ATV to travel the area quicker, and enough food to feed a small army. Only I had a hunting permit, but my family didn't think a young girl being alone for 2.5 weeks would be safe. On this trip, I took a 30-06 Springfield for safety, as well as for hunting, of course. We were up in the mountains in early winter, but there wasn't any substantial snow, which was odd for the time. Kay decided that we should go deeper into the area, as there were many other hunters. So we parked in a half-open clearing, about an hour in. Every road and trail seemed overgrown. Almost no one had been there. After the RV was unpacked and the generator was connected, we took the ATV for a spin. After a few hours, we didn't see any deer, and as the sun began to set, we went. The entire time we were out there, I had this uneasy feeling. At first, I tried to rationalize it. It was my first time hunting like this, after all. Of course, I'd be jumpy and on edge, right? The forest was quiet, but we chalked it up to the animals hiding from the hunters. On that first night, we went to bed. I had a hard time sleeping, while Kay had been asleep for 40 minutes already. There were 3 beds in the RV, a bunk bed and a queen-size bed, both on opposite ends of the RV. Something told me to stay awake that night, to be vigilant. My paranoia was getting the better of me, so much so that I had my Springfield next to me. It was unloaded and the safety was on, but I had the ammo box close just in case. There was this leaf-crunching sound outside the door, and it made my eyes jolt open. Immediately, I tried to convince myself it was the wind, or a deer that had strayed too close to the RV, finally coming out to eat when it felt it was safe. I looked at the clock nearby. I think I had fallen asleep for a while, apparently, because it was now 3 a.m. I became hyper-vigilant, focusing on the leaves crunching. Slowly, the thought of someone or something outside became maddening. It circled the RV, slowly, but became quieter next to the windows. There was something definitely outside. I dared not move, but kept trying to see anything outside the tiny window that I had next to the bottom bunk. All the windows were naturally tinted along with shutters, so I couldn't see anything. Dread truly seeped into my mind when I felt the RV tip slightly over. The only time this happened was when someone put pressure on the first step to get inside the RV. The solid grip I didn't even realize I had on my Springfield got harder. My heart was pounding louder in my ears. I knew the door was locked, but I couldn't help but imagine it wasn't. I expected the door to fly open at any moment, and whatever was there would run in, taking me and Kay out. Whatever was there didn't even try to open the door. Instead, Its weight was lifted off the step, causing the RV to sway back into its proper position with a small shake. Immediately, Kay started to stir, and I wondered how he could be sleeping at a time like this. I heard the leaves crunching again, now getting further and further away. By how they were paced, I guessed it had to have been human. Not too long after Kay woke up, I didn't want to say anything to him. The last thing I wanted was for him to think I was crazy and never come hunting with me again. He knew that I had nightmares often. When we came out of the RV when the sun came up, I saw that it wasn't just a dream. There were huge boot prints in the leaves around the RV. Our car, generator, and AT had been tampered with. Still, I didn't say anything. Kay figured some other hunter was using, if you know what I mean. Maybe they thought this was their camp. When he fired up the ATV, it wouldn't start. It wasn't until later we found out that the battery and gas lines had been cut. Nothing was taken, but our transportation was cut, as if someone wanted to strand us out here. What was even weirder was the fact that the car wasn't damaged, so why would they only cut the ATV? For the next 2.5 weeks, I heard the sound of someone circling our camp and RV every night. They, whoever it was, didn't try stepping on the stairs again though. One night, I heard them messing with the generator. I imagine they were trying to stop it heating. Why would they do that? They had to know that we were armed. We were hunting after all. Why would they try to lure us outside of the RV on their own? That was what I was thinking. They were trying to get us outside of the RV for some reason. And later on, I thought it was because there were more people than just that one person I was hearing. My veins ran cold when I thought of this. We met many other hunters on the trail, and none of them were young females. I was the only one, but I can't entirely be sure that was the reason. Later that next spring, I asked my cousins if they experienced anything weird on their round of the trip. They said the only weird thing they experienced was the campsite being thrashed after they came back one night, and there were dozens of different boot prints. Mystery people who tried to lure me and my grandpa outside. I hope we never actually meet. I think I saw a Skinwalker. From HereComesDatBoi. Location, Alabama. This story takes place at my grandparents' farm in southern Alabama. They have 30 acres of land, and there's tons of deer up there. Of course, my grandpa and I like to go hunting here. We had planned a hunting trip for the morning. That morning, I went one way and my grandpa went the other. He was going to a tree stand he had put deep in the woods, and I went to a ladder stand. This stand had a little box around it, and it was big enough for 2 people. I sat down and was watching around for deer. 2 hours later, it was about 9 a.m. I hadn't had much luck, when suddenly I heard a branch snap to my right. I raised my Marlin 30-30 lever action, ready to bag a nice big buck. But what walked out was not a deer. Whatever it actually was standing on its hind legs. They were veiny and muscular, and it was at least 8 feet tall, with red liquid oozing from its mouth, which was curled into a constant snarl. The creature was unnaturally skinny, with abnormally long arms with 4-inch claws at the end. I quickly ducked down, praying that it hadn't heard me do it. I would peek over to get a look at it every few seconds, until I saw it sniffing the air. Was it onto me? I thought. Surely it couldn't smell me. I was basically praying, hoping. Luckily, the thing began to walk away, but I waited there for another few hours, paralyzed with fear. I didn't stir until I heard the sound of our Coleman UTV. I was relieved. My grandpa had come to pick me up. We got in and went back to the house, and I didn't utter a word to him, even though I knew he knew that something was wrong. This was one of the scariest moments of my entire life, and I hope none of you have to experience the fear that I did. It watched me the whole time. From Dracula's Nightmare. Location: Kentucky. I own land in Hart County, Kentucky, and I've had multiple weird encounters with things I don't think I understand there. This story occurred just a month ago, so I can remember pretty much everything there was to it. I was hunting in a large field. It was deer season, and I hadn't seen anything. Until finally, a doe stepped out into the field. I took aim, and I got a direct hit. It was starting to get dark by then, and I waited a few more minutes before going to retrieve the animal. I called my brother, and he told me that it was getting late, so I should get it before the coyotes did. I sighed and hung up, grabbing my stuff and stepping out of the blind that I was in. I began to walk across the field. Just so you know, I was in the corner of the field, because I don't want to walk too much to get a deer into my truck. I got to my truck and of course drove where I'd seen it, and I followed the trail. I found it lying there. It was far gone. I loaded the animal up and drove all the way to about half a mile from the end of the area. That's when I noticed an extremely bright light up ahead. I thought it was strange, but assumed that maybe it was the game warden. He patrolled these areas often for night poachers, but there was something odd about this light. It didn't look like a vehicle, and it was just sitting in one spot, watching the same part of the area. I didn't think much more than it was just strange. That was until the light suddenly took off and zoomed straight over my truck. And when I say it was fast, it was insane. In just a few seconds, it was above me. A spotlight shined directly on top of my truck. I began to floor it, but it easily kept up. I was beginning to panic, and I lost control of myself. I drove as fast as possible, but it kept following me all the way back to the cabin. When I made it back, I was able to actually see the shape of the aircraft. And to my surprise, it was just a perfect, pure black cube. I almost passed out as it flew off faster than I could even blink. My friends and brother who were there at the time came running out, panicking from the sound and lights they'd seen. Nobody said anything for a few seconds. It felt like hours as we watched the sky, looking for that cube, but it never came back. We never said a single word about it, and I think we all stayed up that night. We went home the next morning and kept our mouths shut. I'll always remember this, even in my final moments. If I rethink my life, this will pop up first. We never saw the cube again, but we still didn't feel safe that night, and we don't feel safe out there to this day. Dogman versus the Game Warden. From Tanner. Location: unknown. I'm a 30-year-old Marine Corps vet, and I currently work for a job that has me going out into the woods to keep the law and peace for wildlife. My partner is a 5-year-old Belgian Malinois named Phoenix. I also have my friend who I work with and was in the Marines with. His name is David. One night, dispatch tells me I'm being requested for a missing person, and I hurry over. As I pull up, David and one of my other coworkers, who we will call Mike, are getting ready for the search. I get out, and David walks up, saying that it's pretty serious and that I better go talk to the person's family. When I visit with the distraught family, the father tells me that he and his 8-year-old son were squirrel hunting. When the father walked away for a moment to use the bathroom, he suddenly heard his son screaming. When he came back, he was gone. At first, I didn't know what to think of this story, and I tell my partners I'm calling BS on it. But they tell me they already have been looking for the kid, and due to finding certain fur where it took place, they believe he may have been taken by a bear, and if that was the case, he wouldn't be alive. Bears aren't common there, but they're not unheard of. I say okay, and I get Phoenix all ready to go. Then we head out into the woods. At first, Phoenix wasn't getting anything, and then all at once he starts crying and moving back and forth. Then the crying turns into a growl, and he backs up to me and starts to bark. I tell him to calm down, and for the most part he does. But then I hear, "We got something big," from Mike. I look up, and about 10 yards in front of us, this little boy runs out with his clothes ripped up. He looks like he's hurt, but not too bad. I grab him, and I take a good look at him. He was gonna be fine. Maybe scarred for life, but fine. I look at Mike with a laugh. "Oh yeah, he's real big, huh?" I then look back at the kid, but he's pointing in the same direction that he just ran out of, and I hear him say under his breath, "It's coming." I look at him and ask what he means. The dog's going crazier now. Then David suddenly screams a curse. I look up, and I know what they're all freaking out about now, because I see this big, wolf-like thing. It looks like it belongs in Game of Thrones as a direwolf. It's only a few yards away. It's staring us down and growling. Phoenix then lunges at the thing. Luckily, I pull on the leash in time before the two make contact. When we gather ourselves and back up away from it, it suddenly stands on two legs and approaches us like that. We didn't know what to do, other than run. We get back to the family's house, kind of cooling down. The kid's fine now and back with his family. We didn't mention the wolf thing to anyone, and it was about time to head home. Mike and David had already left to go home, but I'm talking to the boy's father. I ask him if he saw anything weird when his son was taken or went missing. He says he saw someone carry the boy away, but that's all the info he could give me. As I'm driving down the road, I notice this thing standing in the middle of it. I assume it's some guy who's been drinking a bit too much, but as I get closer, I notice that it's not as human as it should be, and before long I realize it's the same creature that I saw when we found the little boy in the woods. I come to a complete stop, making eye contact with it. At this point, I'm more confident, more curious than scared, so I do something stupid. I'm beginning to open my door when all of a sudden my dog starts going nuts again, and I look to my right, seeing the exact same thing standing right in front of me now. No, it's another one of those creatures. Two of them now. I then look to my left, and there's another one there. These things have my vehicle surrounded, but then, when the one in the middle of the road gets up and walks back into the woods, the other two follow. Confused, I head home and take a nice long vacation. I didn't talk about the incident again until one day, me and David were out doing target practice with clay pigeons. I asked him what he thinks he saw that day. He looked at me and said that the family moved days after that, and no one has bought their property due to the rumors of wolves and dogs running about. I asked him if he believed in that type of stuff. He says, "I've seen a lot of messed up things in my life, but that's by far the creepiest thing I've ever seen, and I don't want to talk about it." It makes me wonder, what else is out there in the woods? Osceola, New York Werewolf, from Charcoal Pitbull 23. Location, Osceola, New York. I was 13 at the time. I was at my stepdad's house. It's in a heavily wooded area. I just got done hunting for the first time with them. It was 4:30 p.m. in the fall, and the sun was just barely above the horizon. We were hanging up the deer when I was about to close the side door to the garage. I heard a twig snap to my right. I looked over, and there I saw the weirdest thing I had ever seen. It had white fur and dark blue eyes, and it was poking out from behind a tree, curiously. I froze and locked eyes with it, trying to understand if what I was seeing was real. I tried to back up, and when it began to approach me, I nearly soiled myself. It was 6 feet tall and walked on 2 legs like a man. I wasn't looking where I was going and tripped over a root sticking up from the ground. When I fell, it took off in a charge towards me. When I tried to pick myself back up, I saw that my pant leg was stuck on the root. It was the first time I ever thought to myself that I was going to perish. I tugged and pulled at my pant leg until finally the fabric gave. When I looked back up, the creature I'd seen was gone. It could have had me if it wanted me. Where did it go? I quickly booked it back inside, locking the door, and I hid behind the couch and waited for my stepdad. Later that night, after telling him what went down, he laughed at me, told me, "Yeah, sure thing, bud." But as soon as he said that, there was a howl in the distance, and I saw his face go white. I could tell by the look on his face that he was doubting, not believing my story now. We still go out in those woods to hunt, but I've never been more aware of my surroundings. I saw something behind my house that I can't explain. From Cody 203. Location unknown. Being 16 years old, 5'8" and 115 pounds soaking wet, I'm not too intimidating to anything or anyone. The area I live is rich with Native American history, mainly Creek, I believe. So about 2 weeks ago, I decided to go walking behind my house at about 10 p.m. at night. I stayed inside all day playing video games, and I went hunting in these woods all the time, so I could use the exercise, and maybe I could see something that I could take back home with me. Squirrel do make for some good dumplings. Anyway, I knew these woods like the back of my hand. Me, along with my 2 dogs, Mike and Jojo, with a flashlight, walked for a little bit. There was nothing out of the ordinary, and soon enough we were turning back to make it back home. But the moment I turned around, it was like a trigger. That relaxed feeling I'd had the whole night disappeared and was replaced with dread. It's like that stereotypical feeling of being watched or followed. We were walking back down the trail when one of my dogs, Mike, who had been walking ahead of me, began to bark and chase something in the woods. That's not unusual for him, because he always chases armadillos. I ran to catch up to him to see what he was barking at. After a few seconds of pursuing him, I heard him go quiet, and I began to worry. A chill went up my spine. I was always told that when that happens, there's something in the area that you need to look out for. I called my dog's name for a few minutes. There was no response. I was beginning to really feel worried. He always comes to his name. Then, out of nowhere, my dog comes hightailing it out of the woods with his tail tucked between his legs. He was shaking violently. I thought he was hurt, so I tried to see what was wrong with him. That's when I heard one of the most unnatural sounds I've ever heard. It was like a wolf howling, mixed with a person moaning. That was enough for me to grab my 2 dogs by their collars and take off running back to my house. As I ran, I swear to God I could hear something moving along the tree line, keeping up with me. It was like something was just tearing down through the bushes and trees, not caring what was in its way. I'd say I was about halfway back to the house when I had this urge to look back. This was one of the worst mistakes I've ever made, because what I saw in the middle of that trail is enough to give me nightmares forever. It was almost like a person, but it was like someone took its skin and stretched it across its bones, vacuum sealed like a plastic bag. Parts of its skin seemed to be decomposing, and there were patches of brown hair and red liquid dripping from its body. It looked like it hadn't eaten in weeks, and when my flashlight shone onto it, it let out another inhuman scream. It pushed itself up to 2 legs, and it started to run straight at me. I expected to be thrown to the ground and devoured, but then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone, as if it was never there. Even so, I ran all the way back to my house, and I about busted down the door to get in. I took my 2 dogs into my room where I stayed up the rest of the night. I tried to go to sleep to just forget about it, but I swear I could hear screaming still coming from the woods all throughout the night. I thought I could hear scraping sounds and clicking noises coming from outside my window, but except for that night, I never heard any of these sounds again, and I haven't seen that skin-stretched creature. I did go back the next day to see what I would find in its wake. I went back to the trail where it had chased me, and sure enough, it looked like a bulldozer had paved a straight line through the forest. In all my years and days being outdoors and hunting, I've never seen anything like that. The Forest Behind My House, submitted by Norman. I haven't shared this story with anyone because I don't like to relive the memory, or more accurately, memories. I should clarify that I live on a 28-acre property in the northern US, and behind the home that borders the road, there is a fairly large forest that stretches significantly to the south and west until it reaches I-75 on the western side. I don't exactly know which of the several events I've experienced would be considered the most or least horrifying per se, but I'll try to order them chronologically. Because, in my opinion, they've developed into progressively more horrifying encounters the older I am, and the more persistent my memory is. So forgive me if the arrangement is more of a bounce than a progression. I'll start with the time I was 5 years old. Throughout childhood, my grandfather would always remain soundly in holiday spirit. On each Halloween, he would put up old pillowcases with cloth hanging from trees to creepily decorate the edge of the forest I lived next to. On Christmas, he would strictly enforce the English tradition of telling ghost stories, and in the summer, he would eagerly anticipate the arrival of Independence Day, solely to set off some M80 firecrackers, the big ones, at midnight. Although the dogs didn't like this, nor our sleeping neighbors, I always found contentness in his will to have a good time. This is besides the point. Let me get back to that point. Those fake ghosts he would hang from trees, the cloth and pillowcase entities that were about 3 to 4 feet long, were where this started for me. Until I was 5, he did this every year, even before I was born, from what I've learned from my mother. On Halloween of 2005, after returning from school, as I was being driven towards our house, I saw the human effigies he hung, and I was excited that another year of tradition was condoned. Upon closer inspection, I noticed one of the ghosts had red spots on its left torso, with a little bit of staining on the right shoulder. I asked my grandfather, "What did you use to make that blood that's on them?" He looked at me kind of silly as he opened the truck door. When I got out, he responded in a voice you'd use to treat a child babbling nonsense. "I didn't put anything on them." At the angle the truck was now at, where we had driven up the lane, our house was now obstructing the view of the forest, so I asked him to walk around the home with me to see what I was talking about. I know what I saw, and I was absolutely positive it was a red shade. When we got to the other side of the house, around a spot where today a magnolia tree stands, I pointed at the effigies, but before I could mutter my brag of being right, I was horrified to see that there was no such effigy with blood on it, and even more chilling, there was one less effigy than there was before. Because originally, there had been 3 hung, always 3. It was a simplicity thing. When I saw the blood-tainted effigy earlier, there were 4. I thought nothing of this, but now it had become ironic that I paid no attention because of how bizarre and creepy it was. Because as an adult, as I look back on it, I know what I saw appeared to be a hanging child, which is a thought I do not fancy entertaining at all. It was so disturbing. Every time I recount my original view of the 4 effigies, I think about how real the bloodied one looked. Every now and then I have nightmares of it lifting its head and seeing myself with a noose around my neck. Anyway, I'll tell the second encounter I had with the forest, which occurred when I was 9. This one is slightly less clear, but more memorable. Every August, my grandfather would take me deer spotting in the forest. This was to get an idea if it was worth hunting back there each season, or if it was too much trouble. On this particular day, we were about 200 meters into the forest, lying atop a log, concealed by a small hill. We had been there for at least 4 hours now, just sitting. As a 9-year-old child, I was definitely tired. I went to sleep, and to my terror, I had one of the recurring dreams I described earlier, of the boy hanging from a tree. Only my grandfather was the one hanging now. This troubled me deeply, and I woke up. As if things couldn't be worse, it was dark when I woke up. I don't even know how. My sleep felt like a power nap at most, nowhere near long enough to put daylight in the grave. I reached for my grandfather and found to my relief that he was still there, but he was asleep as well. Older folks easily drift off. I shook him awake and told him I needed to go home. I developed an overwhelming feeling of dread, but before I could convey that to him, he shushed me and said, "Be quiet." I asked why there was no sound in the forest anymore, which I had only just noticed, which was entirely odd on its own. After a very quiet moment, he agreed that we should return home, so we began the journey back, ending the hunting day early. Luckily, the return was uneventful until we came upon the remains. They appeared to be dog bones. There was even a skull, which was odd for me to see, because in the forest when we stumbled upon bones, the head was always gone for whatever reason. We continued cautiously past the discovery, and were basically in my backyard now, when a very distinct voice filled my ears from behind us. "Be quiet." I turned to the forest expecting to see my grandfather behind me, but instead, there was no one there. But it sounded exactly like him. In fact, it sounded exactly how he had said it. Not like someone else trying to mimic him, but like someone had just repeated it from a tape. I turned back around to see my grandfather further ahead. Scared, I ran to catch up to him. But then I heard it again, and nearly cried when I heard it. It repeated the exact same words from last time so perfectly, like a recording. So I just power walked to my home and pretended nothing happened, even when my grandfather asked why I had just stood there for a moment. The next day, our neighbors that live north beside the church graveyard called and asked if I had seen their dog Josie that had went missing. Not wanting to crush their hopes of finding it in a slow and drawn-out way, my grandfather informed them that we had seen bones the last night. This is important, because later that same day, they claimed their dog Josie had come back from the woods, but it was behaving extremely weird. And though it looked like Josie, they said it didn't act like Josie anymore. What did that even mean? That's all we ever heard of it, but it sounded more terrifying than anything yet. I'm pretty sure they never had the dog after the following of winter 2009. Fast forward 6 years, my sophomore year of high school. Me and a couple of buddies of mine had passed a college-level exam for an advanced placement class, so with it being halfway through our high school life, and that success being announced, we invited some more friends to see who was interested in having a party at my place. Most of the party was uneventful, just my family cooking in front of a bonfire on the side of the house closer to the church and graveyard. It was boring until we decided to play manhunt. Sometimes I look back on the decision to do this and don't comprehend how stupid we really were. I guess I just pushed the past out of my knowledge, rolling it all out as my childhood exaggeration and distortion of fact. It is an important detail to add that one of my friends, the main two being the friends I'm referring to, was playing my Xbox earlier without my permission, and often treated my house like it was his own. putting his shoes up on furniture, etc. I wasn't happy about it, but I figured I'd get him back someday. Now on with the story. My friends, who I'll refer to as Ken and Paul for privacy reasons, were assembled with me and my cousins Nathan, Michael, and Gloriana in front of the bonfire. Before we ran across the property, I made it abundantly clear and painfully obvious I did not want anyone going in the woods. I voted myself to be it first, since I was hosting, and I got a flashlight. Forget how the round played out and what order I found people in, but for context I'll say Ken was hiding behind the chimney, Eric was inside eating leftover hamburgers, Gloriana had stayed cleverly next to the fire, blending in with the crowd that was observing our game. Nathan was in a tree, and my friend Jake, who apparently joined mid-match, was under my grandfather's truck. I'd found them all, and they joined me for my search. After scanning basically the whole property, it became more worrying for me that Paul had probably once again defied the rules of my house and went into the woods. Before we could line up at the tree line, Paul came to us with a worried look on his face. Of course he had went into the woods, but seeing his face, I was no longer mad. I was concerned what we were about to learn, judging by his petrified stance and his whiter-than-snow skin. After questioning him, he explained he had indeed hopped into the forest and recounted a totally different version of events than the other players knew to happen. You see, when we play, the people that are found stay with the hunter and assist his search, so it slowly builds up and goes by faster. Thus our accounts were all in a sequence. But according to Paul, we had come by him several times, walking in front of him. He said at one point, he threw a stick to draw our attention somewhere else, and instead of following it, the person who saw it looked right at him and stood next to him. It was at this point he explained to us he realized that this was not one of us. His best description of what it was detailed along the lines of an all-black person with an animalistic face like a coyote's. He claimed when he realized this, he hauled himself out of the brush and eventually ran into us after hearing no pursuit. When we heard his story, I told everyone to walk to the other side of the house where the fire was and stay there for the rest of the night, grill some marshmallows and all that to forget about what happened. Sometimes over Xbox, me, Ken, and Paul talk about this experience, but each time it becomes less serious to them. However, whenever we do have a meeting at my place from time to time, we still feel very on edge about something in that forest. From the research I've done, I'm almost positive that the dark entities in my forest are skinwalkers. To say the least, I don't venture out there anymore, and I keep my grandfather from doing the same. I hope anybody who has the experience for themselves has a great faith in God, because without religion, I don't know how you would protect yourself from things like that. That forest is pure evil, and I am happier every day knowing I don't have to go back out there again. But sometimes I still have the dreams, but I'm safe in my home. It's been consecrated, and while I'm safe, I want to tell as many people as possible to know that these monsters, or rather the paranormal, are all too real. Stay safe. When the avid hunters who are packed down with plenty of firepower find themselves victims of the strange things in the forest, you better believe that you won't stand a chance either. There are some things in the wilderness that you could never be prepared for, no matter how sane and ready you are. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget, if you want your story to have a chance to be narrated on this show, you can share it with us at darknessprevails.org. If you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/darknessprevails or browse our merchandise at teespring.com/stores/darknessprevails or click the shop button below if you're watching on YouTube. Now then, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous video about 5 real Asian ghost stories. Finn Nabauer says, I am the thing living under your bed, and I wanted to say Hi. Well, hello there, you cutie. But then Fireshard2 Vlog says, Dark, I'm back under your bed. I don't think all you people can fit under my bed, but if you're really under there, good luck. Cabbage says, welcome to the rice fields. Shouldn't you be in the cabbage fields? Or would that be a cabbage patch? Saphira Winters says, you just uploaded the video, but why is your comment 41 minutes old? Before I published a video, I always put my own comment there, so that I don't forget to interact with you guys. Commenting is good for updates, or just talking about nonsense. And Wendigo225 says, do more Wendigo stories, please. I think I'm gonna try to find some Wendigo 4chan stories like I did with the Skinwalker video last time. Those were different and interesting, and I'd love to read more. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't you worry, because more scary stories are on the way. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to donate. Remember, stay safe out there, and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.